Right, thus far, we've looked at this, the lead forearm strike, and this, the rear forearm strike, and we've done the lead and rear single palm full power pushes. Usually we use a shorter kind of check palm, but these are the big pushes. And now we're going to move on and look at this. And that is obviously the lead shoulder strike, or it's one version with the arms up, which is the hardest way of doing it, but we'll start by looking at it this way. So recall in the beginner series I said that when you do the lead shoulder strike, you usually only use open. That's if you're just hitting kind of straightforward, but that's not a rule. There's no rules. You can do what you want. In Yiquan, the ideas don't come from some kind of textbook, and they don't come from some kind of founder who says this is how you've got to do everything. That's not the basis of the logic. The basis of the logic is the human body itself and the target and the laws of physics. But always remember that a bad movement also uses the laws of physics, so it's using the laws of physics to your best advantage. So you can see, for example, in the version I'm doing in the footage playing now, I'm using rise and open. That's a really useful technique for hitting into an opponent's chin, for example, from a clinch. Whereas in this version, you can see that I'm using sink, so I'm dropping my weight and using that more barging in use of open with the shoulder combined with sink. But for the basic template posture, we just use open. And to understand why, let's compare with the rear shoulder strike, which generally speaking uses close and sink. And you can see here really clearly the reason why. It allows you to extend the posture. You can get further without disconnecting your structure. If you leant over more, then the structure is disconnected. But remember, we're talking about Fa Li, where a number of elements have to be timed together to work. So it's not like Tao Lu, where, forms where you can hold a posture. It's a different kind of power generation, so you can do Fa Li and then hold the posture, but if you overextend the structure, if you disconnect the structure while you're doing Fa Li, then you won't get the right contact, you won't get the right force generation and force transmission. And that applies whether you overextend the posture or underextend the posture. So we use primarily open only in the template posture, because otherwise you'll hit the target too soon. If you use open and sink, remember I said that Fa Li is an overall process, so all those different elements have got to be timed correctly. If you hit using open and sink and you're very close range, specifically if you're very close range, which is what we're looking at for the template posture, you hit the target too soon. If you use sink, it foreshortens the posture, and that also disrupts your structure, and it gives you a really weird feeling like you're going to just pop your lower back out or something like that. So the close range template posture just uses open. It creates more volume and it allows the timing of the Fa Li to be correct. Now, there's a video of Yiquan particularly, which I've talked about before, where he's hitting using his shoulder and he's using open and sink. So let's just recap a little bit of that discussion from the beginner series. So it's easier to do it that way. But what he does is when he's demonstrating it, when Yiquan is demonstrating it slowly, he does it with a big lean forward like that, with a drop using down or sinking, if you like. And then when he does it faster on the back, he does it much flatter like that. And particularly he changes to doing it with a moving around. So when he's kind of static on the spot and doing it light, he drops it like that, really drops it down, and when he's moving around it's much flatter, and he does it much more like that. And that's partly because when you do things faster, the posture changes, and however you do things, whether you do them slow or whether you do them fast, and whether you're Yiquan or whether you're somebody much lower down the chain, just like me, it doesn't matter who you are. Your intent everyone's intent kind of functions in the same way, that it will try and maximize power. It's not, your intent isn't very intelligent. We've talked about this before. Like, even though it's a supercomputer, it's like ChatGPT, like it's not sentient. I mean, suppose you could say your intent is because it's linked into your wider consciousness, but what it will do is try and maximize power. That's its primary thing in martial arts. It will try and maximize power. It won't really think about the reality of the context of the fight, and it won't necessarily think about superior ways of doing things if it hasn't been exposed to those and it doesn't understand how to do them, or the body hasn't been trained to express those superior ways of doing things. So it will always try and maximize power in the moment. So if you're doing it slowly and you just want to sink your weight into it like that, and you sink your weight into it, your intent will do that if you don't think about it. And then when you come to do it a little bit faster, it'll change, and the skill, like the more power and speed you put into it, the more the skill level can manifest itself, because there's things about Farley that only really emerge, not in every case, but for the most part, when you start doing things with more power, because it changes the dynamics of the structure. So you see people's more talented version of the way that they do things, the better version. So when you change to doing it with power, change to doing it without this drop down like that, and it explains why Yao Cheng Wang is doing it like that. And it also explains why he does it on a moving round like that, and he doesn't do that off the spot like that, because it's easier to do it moving around like that. You get a phased movement with the body like that. You get a phased movement with the step and the way that you set the posture when you go like that, move around like that, and that's what he's done. So there's two different ways of doing it there. So one is flatter and one is more leaning forward is the key takeaway for the moment. We need to explore those, think about those first, particularly because when we do it with the lead shoulder, we want it usually a little bit flatter, but with a little bit of just a little bit of down, a little bit of sink. And when we do it with the back shoulder, we want it a little bit more using down than on the front one, a little bit more down than round. The front one's a little bit more round than it is down. And those two things are about power generation and they're about distance. So again, one of the reasons why Yao Cheng Wang is doing it down like that rather than just flat like that is he's quite far away from the bag. So if you have to hit it, you have to lean in with the posture like that. But then when you're moving around the bag, your intent can take over and manage the range control better. So you can hit, you're a closer range, and you can hit using much more around the rotational axis than the horizontal axis. But we start with this, and of course it is short range, and that starts to, as the science of Yiquan starts to tell us things like, well, how do we get into range? What do we do if we're in range? When do we use this? What's it for? What kind of circumstances are we using it in? So we start with the basic one, which is just off the spot, and you've got to get close to, if you're going to hit on the bag, you've got to get quite close to the target and imagine that the target is quite close. And it's going to be like 80% rotational Farley this way, hitting round that way. You can see the relaxation instead of stiff movement. Like, it can be powerful and it can transmit a lot of force, but what we want is relaxation across the whole body to get that speed. And you can see it in the phase movement, like, and the muscle bounce and the way that the body functions, as opposed to a stiff and just trying to use brute force. And you see that all the time on the punch bag, where people try to use really stiff movement and brute force to get power. And it's not even necessarily about power, it's about the reality of the context of the fight. That if you use the correct relaxation through the whole body as a system, that you can get similar amounts of power from small movement. I mean, a big muscle man brutes like you see all the time in the gym, a big muscle man smacking the bag, you know, they're gonna knock you out if they hit you like that. But it's the reality of the context of the fight. Those people aren't good boxers. So using relaxed movement to generate a similar amount of force, but being more in harmony with the reality of the context of the fight, thinking about guards and combinations and being able to move and generate force with less energy, because I'm using rotational Farley like that. It doesn't, for example, want to do a pivot route on the front foot. Again, we can scientifically explain that, and I've looked at this before, that when you do smaller movements, the smaller the movement is out from the body, the larger the movement is out from the body, the more generally speaking you want to do a pivot route, because it generates more force and it's more in harmony with the reality of the context of the fight. The smaller the movement, the more you go back to more traditional kind of Xing Yiquan ways of releasing force, using different kinds of scrape routing or fishtail routing. So we're not getting much more close range than hitting with the shoulder directly. So my body doesn't want to do a pivot route. I mean, it can do it like, but it knows that it can't. Like, my intent knows that it can't generate as much force doing a pivot route close range as it can doing some kind of flat routing, some kind of more traditional Xing Yiquan routing. And I don't have to understand completely scientifically why, for example, if I do it more rotational around the axis, as opposed to adding in more leaning forward, why does my intent want to set it on the back foot? My intent knows that that's the right way, that generates the most force. So I don't even need to know scientifically why that happens. I just need to know that my intent does that. I trust my intent, but I don't always trust it to do the right thing. I trust it to do the right thing given a certain set of variables and parameters that I feed into it, that it knows that's the best way to do it. But I know that there's a better way to do it if I can get more power if I start adding a little bit of I start combining this axis with this axis. So remember, these are virtual reality in reality. And I talked about you can have this rotational axis for Farley, you can have this axis, you can go side to side as well, they're not the only. But even side to side is just a variation of these two and how they interact. So we can have more forward and round like that with these two axes. So this is this going forward, and this is this going round, and we can have more like that. Just like when we punch, we raise up like that. So almost like, well, it's the reverse of that, where we're going to come forward a little bit like that. And because we're imagining close range, we don't need to do too much like that. And that's what Yao Cheng Wang's doing when he's doing it initially on the bag. He's quite far away from the bag, relatively speaking. So he's having to use more down like that. Your intent will just go with that, because dropping your weight into it adds more physical weight behind it, and it creates a more solid hit when you're doing it slowly like that. But we're imagining something closer, much closer, like your opponent's body is much closer to you when you want to hit, and we're going to hit a little bit forward like that, and that allows me then to change the routing. Well, actually, my intent does it. My intent doesn't want to do it like that. It wants to do it forward like that, with the kind of what we used to call the energy of a car suddenly braking route, in a much more traditional Xing Yiquan routing, scrape routing. So it wants to, but it's only a tiny little bit of, like, scrape routing itself can be different. Like when we do it with a push, because the posture's longer and further out, we usually do a bigger scrape routing posture like that, which can be dangerous. It can slip, but the idea is you can catch it in this kind of Tai Chi posture with the heel, but even then not always. For that, it's still, I can feel then it's still partly setting on the back heel, like the back heel's just coming up slightly and then slamming back down into the floor. So it's setting on both, but the routing, the dominant routing is the front foot. Like that. So I can still hear it setting, I can still feel it setting on the back foot, but I'm using this now to generate, because it can just get all my body weight moving forward into the equation of mass times speed.
Shh.